Chapter 11. Almost a Murder. "Well, Mother," said Bertie at supper on the day he had received his profits from the C.H.&D. corner, which was still engaging the attention of the exchange, "I think you ought to buy a house for yourself." "A house, Bertie!" exclaimed Mrs. Ballister in surprise. "What put that into your head?" "The idea has been in my head ever so long, and now I think you've lived long enough in an everyday flat. Suppose you buy a house for a change." "It would be very nice, Bertie. Perhaps it would be well to use your $3,000 in that way. It would remove it from the temptations of the stock market," she added with a smile. "I've been nervous lest you might use some of it to try to increase your little pile." "How did you know but that I did?" grinned her son. "Bertie, you didn't." "Well, Mother, I might as well own up. I put $2,950 of that $3,000 on C.H.&D. stock at 59.
"Bertie Ballister, how could you? But you haven't lost it all?"
his mother cried breathlessly. "If I had, I shouldn't be talking house to you, would I? No, I'm not in the losing crowd these days. I stand in with the winners. That's the only way to fill my barrel."
"Now, don't keep me guessing, Bertie."
"All right, Mother. I sold out my stock at 91, and I made—"
"Well?"
"To be exact, $15,875. It was some time before Bertie could convince his mother that he had really made so much money in the market. In fact, it was not until he had produced his broker's statement of his account that Mrs. Ballister woke up to the fact that she was the mother of one of the shrewdest little operators in Wall Street.
"And I suppose you'll go on risking your winnings until some day you'll get caught like the big operators do once in a while, and then you will be as poor as ever,"
said Mrs. Ballister as they sat over the remains of the supper. "Oh, I don't know," replied the boy. "I've got to make my barrel, of course, but I don't have to make it all at once. That's why I want you to buy a nice house where we can live rent-free, and where you'll feel as independent as you used to before you were married. If anything should happen to wipe me out sometime, you would have the house, at any rate."
"I think it's a good idea. How much do you want to put in a house, Bertie?"
"Anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000.
"Very well. I will see what I can get for that money."
A month later, Mrs. Ballister purchased a very handsome dwelling, one in a row of a growing part of Brooklyn, for $3,800. She got it at a bargain, for it had cost something over $5,000. But the owner was obliged to sell, and the advantage was hers. As soon as the title was passed upon and no flaws found, Bertie handed his mother the cash to pay for it, and within the week they moved in. He gave a housewarming a few days afterward, to which many young people, some of them pupils of Mrs. Ballister, were invited. You may be sure Beryl Foster wasn't forgotten. She came over with her brother Willie, a bright young fellow of 16 who had struck up quite a friendship with Bertie. They had games and singing and piano music and a lot of good things to eat and drink, so that when the party finally broke up, it was voted a great success. With $15,000 on deposit in the Wall Street Bank, Bertie kept his eyes open for an opportunity to double that pile, but chances such as he was gunning for didn't seem to fly his way. Stocks went up and stocks went down day after day, but the little messenger capitalist didn't bite, and his fleece remained safe in the bank, while the woods were full of other people who came into the street with plenty of money and were now living on a diet of snowballs. One day Mr. Morse sent Bertie on an errand to the Exchange Place building, where Stuart Sheldon had his offices. The man he called on had an office on the same floor with Bertie's uncle. The boy had transacted his business and was on his way to the elevator when he noticed a big, well-dressed man walking up and down the corridors in front of Mr. Sheldon's private office door. He seemed to be very much excited over something, and the lad began to wonder whether this was another crank or lunatic like the fellow who had tried to blow the Morse bank up. If he saw Bertie coming along, he didn't pay any attention to him, at any rate. Just then the elevator stopped at the end of the corridor, and Stuart Sheldon got out. He looked as spick and span as if he had just stepped out of a showcase. Mr. Sheldon, always a fine dresser, and his athletic figure set his clothes off to the best advantage. "He is a splendid-looking man," breathed Bertie. "I only wish he was half as decent to his sister, my mother. But he turned her down cold, and I have no use for him." The boy watched his flinty-hearted relative walk grandly along the corridor toward his office. "I don't wonder he puts on style. I understand he made more than $1 million out of that C.H.&D. pool." He was about to turn toward the elevator again when he saw the excited gentleman rush up to Mr. Sheldon, speak passionately to him, and finally shake his fist in his face. "Hello," thought Bertie. "I wonder what's up now. This man seems to have it in for Mr. Sheldon." Sheldon, however, resented the attitude of the man who had confronted him. He said something back which Bertie couldn't hear, and then started on. The other man wasn't to be put off. He began to shower abuse on the Sheldon broker in a loud, excited tone, and, following Bertie's uncle up, struck him a violent blow in the face just as he was about to enter his office. Mr. Sheldon staggered back under the blow, but when he recovered, he jumped at his aggressor and promptly knocked him down. Bertie watched the conflict with considerable interest, wondering which of the two would come out on the top. He had no sympathy for his uncle, though he had no very strong desire to see him whipped. He had seen many little rackets between angry brokers, but in no case were the scrappers badly hurt. This mix-up, however, soon promised more serious results, for even as Bertie watched them, the fellow on the floor rose, and with a dreadful oath, drew a revolver from his hip pocket and pointed it at Mr. Sheldon. Bertie had seen him reach for his gun, and the movement was so significant that the boy gave a gasp and then rushed forward to try to avert the tragedy he saw was coming. And he was only just in time to dash upon the infuriated stranger and strike up his arm when the revolver went off with a crack that awoke the echoes of the corridor. End of chapter 11.